Cargo cults. They were first discovered in Melanesia. They occur when a more technologically advanced society makes contact with a less technologically advanced society. In Melanesia, cargo cults would build fake airplane runways, radio transmitters out of bamboo, and airplanes out of palm fronds, in the belief that this would result in cargo being delivered to them by God. And all of this was inspired by watching planes landing and dropping off goods. These cargo cults sprung up out of a lack of knowledge of how modern systems of transport work. They assumed they were supernatural, that these invisible interlocking systems of technology, trust, and cooperation, they were gods. And if you appealed to the gods right, goods just magically appeared. Science fiction put a new twist on the idea of the cargo cult. Instead of islands in the Pacific, they wrote stories about generation ships bound out into space to colonize new worlds, in which the descendants of the creators of those ships had forgotten how to build them, or that those ships had ever even been built. The ship had become their entire world, and the people who still knew how to run the technology became their priests, and the machine they lived within, their god. And of course, the story always starts when the ship breaks down. I want you to think for a moment about all the systems of cooperation and trust you rely upon every day. Paying for your food requires faith in the value of the money in your wallet. Depositing your paycheck requires trust in the banking system. Walking down the street relies on your belief in the essential peacefulness of your neighbors, enforced by a system of law. Driving your car requires cooperation with other drivers to set aside immediate benefit to obey arbitrary rules while traveling at lethal speeds. All of these interlocking systems of trust and cooperation underpin the functioning of our complex society. We rely on them for so much, and we don't even know where they come from or how to repair them when they start to fail. We live in a cargo cult. The systems of trust and cooperation that we rely upon have started to break down, so to speak, and we have no idea how to repair them. The left-right doesn't know, and the right-left doesn't know, and neither does the right-right-left or the left-left-right. David Roberts recently wrote an article called "America is Facing an Epistemic Crisis." What if Mueller proves his case and it doesn't matter? Of course, referring to the Trump situation. It starts by pointing out a bit of fake news that made the viral rounds on the right. A banner that supports pedophilia was unfurled at a protest against Mark Cernovich. Apparently, the banner was planted by a troll. I have to confess that I got taken in by this troll for about 5 minutes before one of our followers pointed out that it was a troll, and I located video showing the banner being planted and quickly removed. Vox was right to call out this bit of fake news, of course, but the Vox article includes a graph and a quote from the executive report for a document called, quote, "Partisanship, Propaganda, and Disinformation, Online Media, and the 2016 U.S. Presidential Election." It's published by the Bergman Klein Center for Internet and Society at Harvard University. This is a direct quote from the executive summary of that research paper. Prominent media on the left are well distributed across the center, center-left, and left. On the right, prominent media are highly partisan. I was immediately struck by a question. How did the study define left, center-left, center, center-right, and right? Unlike, I'm guessing, the majority of Vox's readership, I went to the source document for the graphs and statistics David Roberts cites. The executive summary wasn't forthcoming with an answer, so I dug up the entire report, and this is what I found. The report defines all of the aforementioned categories based on Twitter retweets by Clinton or Trump supporters. An outlet is considered far more right if 4 out of 5 or more retweets were by a Trump supporter. It's far left if 4 out of 5 or more retweets were by a Clinton supporter. It's either center left or center right if 2 or more out of 5 retweets were by somebody from the opposing side. And it's centrist if it was equally retweeted by Trump or Clinton supporters. What this analysis really discovered is that Trump supporters are more likely to retweet media outlets on the left. And that left, and center media outlets do not link to media outlets on the alternative right, but media outlets on the alternative right do link to center left and center media outlets. Because Trump supporters are more likely to engage and retweet media on the left, and Clinton supporters were less likely to engage with and retweet media on the right, the center left was larger than the center right. Trump supporters were 3 to 4 times more likely to retweet something preferred by the left than Clinton supporters were to retweet something preferred by the right. From this, the report concluded that the right was more polarized and partisan. The hand waving they used to tie this data to their conclusion is that the retweeting choices of Clinton and Trump supporters demonstrated whether or not what they tweeted was partisan. In other words, if a Trump supporter retweeted a left-leaning article, it wasn't because the Trump supporter was more willing to engage with material on the left, but because that article was objectively less partisan and left-leaning. Similarly, when a Clinton supporter decided not to retweet media from the right, it was not because the Clinton supporter was less willing to engage with material on the right, but because the media was objectively more partisan and right-leaning. Now, you might say that proves the exact opposite of the study's conclusion, that in fact it was the left that demonstrated more partisan behavior in its retweeting. It's actually worse than that. The way they structured their research, they could have hand-waved the data either way. If they had found that Clinton supporters were more likely to retweet media on the right, they would have simply reported that as indicating a lesser degree of partisanship among Clinton supporters. Harvard is either creating students that can't science, or they're creating sophists for the left. How this study was structured should never have been approved by an ethics board because it doesn't control for all of its potential confounding factors. It doesn't control for the possibility that people retweeting media with opposing views doesn't mean the media itself is less partisan. It could mean the people choosing to retweet it are less partisan. This is junk science, and I want to establish the fact that Vox based much of its fantasizing about the reactions of the right to Mueller's investigation on junk science. So David starts his article by asking the following question. What if Mueller proves his case and it doesn't matter? An increasingly large chunk of Americans believes a whole bunch of crazy things, and it's warping our politics. For example, half of Americans apparently believe the other half are morally subhuman racists, sexists, xenophobes, etc. That's actually pretty crazy if you think about it. And pretty dangerous. Now, in this case, at least the right only believes crazy things about individual politicians. And you remember how I talked about us not knowing how to create or repair the systems of cooperation our complex society relies on. Yes, it's going to come up. Ignoring and getting people to believe, one half of America to believe that 1 out of every 2 individuals they know, Joe who picks up their garbage, Sue who rings in their groceries, Mark who does their taxes, Ellen who teaches their kids, is secretly harboring the ultimate evil in their hearts. That's certainly going to help with maintaining that trust we need to keep our society going. So David goes on to say the following, quote, what if Mueller proves his case and it's not enough? What if there's no longer any evidentiary standard that could overcome the influence of right-wing media? The U.S. is undergoing an epistemic breach. And for his Vox readers, David offers a definition of epistemology. I'm not going to insult you all by doing the same. Assume that your Google foo is fine or that you already know what epistemology means. I'm quoting David again. A split, not just in what we value or want, but who we trust and how we come to know things. And what we believe we know and what we believe exists is true, has happened, and is happening. The primary source of this breach is the U.S. conservative movement's rejection of the mainstream institutions devoted to gathering and disseminating knowledge. Journalism, science, the academy. The ones society has appointed as references in matters of factual dispute. You mean that Harvard pseudoscience that you just cited? The research structured in such a way it could support any conclusion, even the opposite one to the one that it eventually came to. That left-wing sophistry, that institution. Quote, but the right's institutions are not the same kind as the ones they seek to displace. Mainstream scientists and journalists see themselves as beholden to values and standards that transcend party or faction. They try to separate truth from tribal interests and have developed various guild rules and procedures to help do that. They see themselves as neutral arbiters, even if they do not always uphold that ideal in practice. That's nice. That's nice that they see themselves that way, because gosh darn it, how you see yourself is what really matters here. Everyone should see you that way, the way that you see yourself, or they're just bad people, horrible people, harassers. You just say you uphold equality, and magically that's what you do. You just say you uphold journalistic ethics, and magically that's what you do. No need for any kind of journalist, watchdog, or consumer group to provide oversight. No need for that. In fact, those kind of people, they're horrible people for not believing us. Quote, the pretense for the conservative revolution was that mainstream institutions had failed in their role as neutral arbiters, that they had been taken over by the left, become agents of the left in referees' clothing, as it were. But the right did not want better neutral arbiters. I'm not going to answer for the right. I want better neutral arbiters. I also notice that you switch from fielding an accusation of your own side to lobbing one at the right. Quote, the institutions it built scarcely made any pretense of transcending faction. They are of and for the right. There is nominal separation from conservative media, from conservative politicians, think tanks, and lobbyists, but in practice they are all part of the conservative movement. They are prosecuting its interests, and that is the goal. So they're just like the left-focused media and academia then, like this Harvard think tank. This is just one big no you. Indeed, the far right rejects the very idea of neutral binding arbiters. There is only us and them. Only a zero-sum contest for resources. That mindset leads to what I call tribal epistemology, the systematic conflation of what is true with what is good for the tribe. And of course, you are not doing it. Because what's good for your tribe is what's good for all and everyone. Nobody's ever figured that one out. Brace for some incoming tribal epistemology. Okay, some dehumanizing of the enemy, in this case the right. Quote, there has always been a conspiratorial and xenophobic fringe on the right, but it was fitfully held in place by gatekeepers through the early decades of America's post-war prosperity. The explosion of right-wing media in the 1990s and 2000s swept those gatekeepers away, giving the loudest voice, the most exposure, and the most power to the most extreme elements on the right. The seventh seal has been broken. The end times are nigh. A wave of demonic right-wingers are spewing forth like the vomit of Satan. But that's not tribal epistemology right there. Quote, the right-wing media ecosystem became a bubble from which fewer and fewer inhabitants ever ventured. And this is where David cites the aforementioned pseudoscience from Harvard to prove his claim that the right is more partisan than the left. He quotes, the center of gravity of the overall landscape is center-left because less Clinton supporters engage with stuff from the right. Partisan media sources on the left are integrated into this landscape and are of lesser importance than the major media outlets of the center-left. The center of attention and influence for conservative media is on the far right. The center-right is of minor importance and is the least represented portion of the media spectrum. Remember, center-right in this research is defined by right-wing media that left-wing media links to or that Clinton supporters retweet. It is particularly dishonest to say that because the right engages more with the left media than the left engages with the right, that the center of attention and influence for conservative media is on the far right. In essence, they found the only reason there is a larger center-left is because the right acknowledges and engages with at least some left material. And the only reason the center-right is smaller is because the left does not engage with material on the right. So the more accurate statement is not, quote, the center of attention for conservative media is on the far right, but that, quote, the left engages less with media on the right in its entirety. With that in mind, the very aptly named partisanship, propaganda, and disinformation concludes with the following, quote, conservative media is more partisan and insular than the left. Partisanship talks about how the right is less integrated than the left. In other words, the left and the center, as they've defined them, does not actually link to media on the right. If you look at the media landscape partisanship paints, the right, aside from Fox, is almost exclusively alternative media made possible by the rise of the internet, meaning that the right was chased off traditional mainstream media platforms. Unfortunately for the left, that coincided with the rise of a new media with a greater ability to maintain ideological cohesion so that these aforementioned gatekeepers were no longer able to herd the right ever leftward. Anyway, after this point, David continues on with some paranoid ideological xenophobia. He paints a threat narrative in which the Mueller investigation proves collusion between President Trump and the Russians, but the right just ignores facts. Ignoring facts. I guess that's not quite the same as structuring research so that it proves your conclusion no matter what. Is that what tribal epistemology means? Research that proves your tribe is right no matter what? If the right had access to academia like the left does, maybe it too could create facts like the one David cites. Using this alternative universe Harvard developed facts for the right, if Mueller discovers inescapable evidence of guilt, that guilt would still prove Trump's innocence. Quote, there is no longer any settling such arguments. The only way to settle any arguments for both sides is to be committed, at least to some degree, to a shared standard of evidence and accuracy and to place a measure of shared trust in institutions meant to vouchsafe evidence and accuracy. Without that basic agreement, without common arbiters, there can be no end to the dispute. That's certainly true, David. Someone has to advocate for all those systems of trust and cooperation that we have no fucking clue anymore how to fix or build. And I agree with you. The right isn't doing it. The only problem is, neither are you or the left. Quote, if one side rejects the epistemic authority of society's core institutions and practices, there's just nothing left to be done. Truth cannot speak for itself like the voice of God from above. It can only speak through human institutions and practices. The reason why more and more people don't believe the institutions of government, academia, and media is encapsulated in that Harvard study with its convenient research that proves the conclusion no matter what facts it finds. People don't trust you because you're dishonest. Simple as that. You, academia, you, media, and government goes without saying, you are dishonest. That's why people don't believe you. And you can shame them as much as you like, you will never change that fact. Those people who don't trust you ran to the right thinking the right would be more honest. They're probably not because they're pushing their own cargo cult, but that's what happened. Quote, that's what U.S. elites are truly afraid to confront. What if facts and persuasion just don't matter anymore? What you mean what if people like me actually look at the facts you cite and find out that they aren't facts at all, but biased research intended to push a particular agenda? I don't know, maybe you'll kill us all. Is that what the elites need to work up a threat narrative in which people like me just deserve the axe? David offers up some more paranoid ideological xenophobia. I don't know and I don't care if there's any accuracy to it. You can read it yourself. Most likely neither Clinton nor Trump are as bad as the conspiracies make them out to be. I'm sure you can find skeletons in both of their closets if you look hard enough. Do not know, do not care. If the right and the left are two football fields, or two football teams playing in a stadium, then I am the stadium repairman, woman, whatever. In this scenario, I guess a centrist would be someone who just likes football. I don't give a shit about football. I just repair stadiums. Quote, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe U.S. institutions have more life in them than I think. But at this point, it's just very difficult to imagine that anything could bridge the epistemic gulf between America's tribes. We are split in two, living in two different worlds with two stories and facts shaping our lives. We no longer learn or know things together as a country, so we can no longer act together as a country. How about making an effort, David? Instead of spouting ideological xenophobia at the right and everybody who doesn't agree with your point of view lockstep, you could try, I don't know, reading and retweeting one of the right's articles, like they do yours on the left, which you then turn around and use to prove that they are more partisan. Oh, I can totally see why they're pissed. It's not hard. In fact, maybe the reason why Harvard found people on the right are more likely to engage with material on the left is because those people aren't really on the right. They supported Trump because he was hostile to the institutions they no longer trust. I don't particularly like Trump myself, but not liking Trump doesn't make me like being lied to. I don't like the right, but I fucking loathe the media. I come by my hatred of the media naturally. I watched as they engaged in smear campaigns against two groups of people who did nothing wrong. The first had the audacity to care about men. The second had the audacity to be a bunch of know-nothing plebs, like those people that you were talking about, the elites not accepting, that appoint themselves watchdogs over journalistic ethics. A good portion of the people who voted for Trump voted for him because he was hostile to media. Full stop. They didn't care about his position on other topics or his character or him being a corporate oligarch. They just liked the fact he was shitting on the mainstream media. And what did you expect after you libeled a huge group of people based on nothing more than their leisure time pursuits? If Trump is a monster, the mainstream media created him and anointed him their monster in chief, and you only have yourselves to blame for it. You sowed so much hatred and distrust. You created a giant community of people who would vote for a unicorn fart if it came out against media lies and manipulation. Anyway, you're probably wondering why I mentioned cargo cults. Or you've forgotten. Either way, here comes the payoff. We don't know how to fix or repair the trust that our cooperative systems rely on. I think you know that's a big problem, David. I think a lot of people on the left are aware that it is a problem. Of course, you have no idea how to fix it because we all live in a damn cargo cult. I can tell you that what you're doing is not going to fix it. The solution to terminal partisanship isn't defeating the other side. That's only going to encourage more paranoid tribalism. And if you truly are less partisan than the right, shouldn't it be you on the left to offer the first olive branch by definition? So where is the olive branch from the left? Of course, you're not going to do it. That would be acknowledging all those racist, sexist, xenophobic, heretic, communist, capitalist, etc., are human. You're not going. Those people aren't human. What are you working towards here? You can't have that. That's why your side is terminal, David. Because you have all those scary words that mean one thing. All mean one thing. People on the right are subhuman. People not on the left are subhuman. People not moving in ideological lockstep with you are subhuman because their thoughts are diseased and dirty, filthy. Don't you wish you had some Clorox bleach to pour into our brains? And that's how paranoid ideological xenophobia becomes a race to the fucking bottom. Anyway, we live in a cargo cult. We are a bunch of primitives clustered around the belly, inside the belly of a gigantic ship, around a replicator that gives us everything we need, but we don't know how it works or how it's programmed. We've lived for generations in a machine no one knows how to repair or replace, huddled around a replicator that's become our god. We know how to run the replicator. You just shame it. You shame it and shame it and shame it and shame it, and all the shit you need to live pops right out. So we sit in the belly of our ship, popping out spawn and shaming the replicator to feed us. And it seems to work. But suddenly, the machine started to break down. And that's where our story starts. We have two factions in our cargo cult. I'll call them cult left and cult right. Cult right clings to the traditional forms of shame. They start with the machine god wills. Cult left insists that new forms of shame are needed. They all start with women need. And here we are with cult left and cult right pointing fingers at each other. The machine stopped working because you stopped believing in the machine god. The machine stopped working because you care about the machine god more than you care about women. In fact, the machine god is a lie, and it's oppressing us all by not giving us what we need when we need it, the moment we think of the need. And between these two groups, no one is fixing the machine because cult right denies that men ever made it, and cult left won't look at anything that doesn't put women first. And so we drift to our doom in a dying spaceship. All these systems of trust and cooperation that we rely upon for everything. Delivering food, getting to work, getting paid, storing our resources for tomorrow. All these systems we have no idea how to build or repair. All of this trust that those systems run on being squandered. And it strikes me, it's far easier for cult left and cult right to distract us all over a squabble over who is more culty than recognizing that we are floating in a dying spaceship that needs some serious, hard questions asked in order to have a hope of being fixed. Speaking of hard questions, by asking them, I've discovered there's a chasm where both sides have hidden all of the forbidden knowledge. Cult right hid the historical artifacts explaining the construction of our mechanical god. Cult left hid all the repair manuals because machine forbids something's needs be put it before women's. Do you want to know what's in that chasm? Would you like to know that? Well, unfortunately, it's got to wait because I gotta go to a trial. Oh. Okay, this is all of our evidence done in quadruplicate. I'm going to just put this down again. Oh. This represents 6 weeks, a month and a half worth of work. As you can see, it's divided up into 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 categories. 7 little tabs. Each category I very carefully have labeled and indexed each piece of information, each piece of evidence. The first category is all of the correspondence, all of our evidence that we did not infiltrate the convention, including a list of in their guidebook, being listed in their guidebook, and all of our badges, and the contract they themselves submitted in evidence for the summary dismissal, which has the name Honey Badger Brigade on it. So, and then the next section is some of the artwork we had at the booth, and then the next section is, sorry, this is really awkward, is the connections, some of the, it's demonstrating the malice and the connections between Sam Maggs and Soha Karim. Soha Karim, if you don't know who that is, was the first person to tweet at the expo about our booth in a negative manner. So this is all the indexed of all the connections between the three parties, Sam Meggs, Soha Karim, and Jill Pentozzi. Sam Meggs was the editor of the Mary Sue at the time, and Jill Pentozzi was the writer of that particular article. And this is the index to the Twitter timeline, which is right here, indicating all of the public correspondence between Jill Pentozzi and the public, talking about how the Calgary Expo, what was happening at the Calgary Expo, all of the tweets related to this incident, some of which have been deleted, interestingly enough. And then the next, excuse me, oh my god, it's so awkward. Okay, the next is the list of all the negative articles that resulted from the Mary Sue's publication. Not a fun list to compile, folks. Seeing you being called a liar and a harasser in print multiple times is not a fun evening. Okay, the next section is our audio-visual evidence that we did not harass anyone, we did not infiltrate anything, and that we acted in good faith the entire time we were at the Calgary Expo. And then finally, this section right here is all of my pecuniary losses. So this is all of my losses that are backed up by an invoice. Oh, okay. Putting that down. Now, let me show you the defense's exhibits. Right. Now, they submitted the trade name searches. I don't know why that was already resolved on the name that we accidentally ended up suing them under because of all of the various names, and we were trying to pinpoint the right one. But so they resubmitted that. I don't know what they're going to be doing with that. They submitted my payment to them, which incidentally, one of the things that we had to prove as the plaintiff was that we did indeed have a contract with them. And they helped us prove that. They submitted the Mary Sue's article, which we also submitted. They submitted the Expo policies and procedures, which we also submitted. They submitted these tweets, which we also submitted. And then this is the evidence that they submitted that we had no way of accessing, but we ended up using to prove our case during the summary dismissal. And then we're left with this. 10 pages of some interesting stuff. And when I take away that 10 pages of interesting stuff, we're left with all of the Calgary Expo and the Mary Sue's evidence that we infiltrated the convention under false pretenses or harassed anyone. Now that binder I showed you is all of our evidence that we didn't do those things. And that's what I've been doing for the past 6 weeks. It's been compiling all of that evidence and making sure that I have 4 copies of it for trial. It has been quite an experience, and I can see how legal redress is beyond the ability of a lot of people because they can't take time off, hand the reins over to producers who, to create the content, and just plow into understanding a case as complex as this. And it is complex. But that's what I've been doing for the last 6 weeks. I've been trying to do everything I can to make sure we have a fighting chance in this. And I don't know if we'll win. It's always up in the air. There's always unforeseen circumstances. Who knows? But I've done my best to give us a fighting chance because I know that you guys have supported us getting this far. And I want to make sure that I give back as much as I can. And thanks for your support. What's going to happen next week? I don't know. We are going to be doing not live stream, but private streams with our patrons and the supporters, people who supported our legal efforts each day after the trial ends, just because we need traffic control and it's going to be hairy. And then after all of the dust is settled, figured everything out, we will do an announcement of what has happened. So that's what's going to happen next week. Probably won't be seeing us till the end of that. So See you on the flip side.